For those of you that don't know me, my name's Ian. I'm a technical architect at the BBC based in Manchester. And as Andy says, I work in iPlayer and Sounds. And as an architect, I work with multiple agile product teams building audience-facing products. So a bit different to the other talks of today in that I'm not a security specialist. I'm not part of InfoSec, but I have been working very closely with InfoSec to improve our security position. And I suppose I'm here today to give an iPlayer and Sounds spin on how we approach security while building product features. So I'm going to talk about our security journey so far, and then I'm going to finish with some of my thoughts and observations on the softer side of security. So just to get you into the mindset, when you think of computer hackers, what is the sort of thing that comes to mind? Maybe it's something like this, right? A hoodie in a dark room somewhere, a bit dark and dingy, lots of terminal windows, a bit creepy. Or maybe it's something like this, right? This is Dennis from Jurassic Park, who looks like he might be hacking iPlayer right now. But no, in all seriousness, the reality is that we're facing threats from multiple angles, whether that's nation states and governments who want to discredit us for our news output, hacker organizations who want to steal and sell our data, or even just script kiddies, right, who are just bored at the weekends and have nothing better to do. And this isn't just theory, right? It seems like new attacks are happening almost every day. And if you cast your mind back to Christmas, New Year 2016, the whole BBC website was brought down on and off for about 2 weeks. And even if you don't work at the BBC, you probably noticed or heard about this because it was widely covered in the press, obviously including our friends at BBC News. And some of our services stopped working, including iPlayer. And this is a problem because if any of these attackers succeed, it's possible that we could lose our most valuable asset. So what is our most valuable asset? Well, I'll give you a clue, right? It's not Gary Lineker, so we'll start there. And it's not even David Attenborough. It's our reputation. It's our connection to the audience. Okay, the BBC is pretty old, right? And it's built a reputation over almost 100 years. Trust is the foundation of the BBC. It's a core part of our values, and it's important that the audience can trust us. This is the thing that we're protecting. So about 2 or 3 years ago, a guy called David, who's the head of engineering for iPlayer and Sounds, came over, casually sat down, and asked me what our security position was. And I had to tell him that I didn't know. And to be honest, I didn't really think it was my problem. It's like, why is he asking me this? But it turns out that no one in iPlayer and Sounds really knew. Like, no one had that holistic vision across all of our technical estate. And then David made it my problem to find out, which led me on a journey of going much deeper into the world of security than I was used to. So what do you do? Like, what's the first thing you do in a situation like this? Well, I like to think that I did the same thing that any sane person would do in this situation. And that's create a Confluence page, which might sound a little bit odd, but the intention of this page is to be a place that we could snapshot our security position. This page should be the equivalent to a check engine warning light on a car dashboard. And we've been doing a lot of work with both InfoSec and all of our teams in iPlayer and Sounds to try and snapshot our security status and record it on this page. So when we talk about snapshotting, like, what exactly are we on about here? Well, I guess there's kind of two main bits. The first is the public-facing outer shell, right? So we're testing essentially like the front door to our audience-facing services. And then the other part is the lower level internal testing, right, which is focused more on the actual source code and the third-party dependencies. And this process has been really useful because snapshotting has taught us a lot of things that we didn't know. The most important of which was cross-site scripting vulnerabilities, which happen to be present in both iPlayer and Sounds. And for those in the audience that may not be familiar with cross-site scripting, just let me translate that for you. So last year, British Airways was hacked, and they had, it was 500,000 customers' details that were stolen, including credit card information. So like this was a pretty big deal. And they were fined £183 million by the ICO, and that was on top of the cost to their reputation. And this attack was performed via cross-site scripting, which is the same vulnerability we had in both iPlayer and Sounds, which just happened to be, I mean, I hesitate to call it a happy accident because they're separate code bases. It was just a coincidence. And this is scary stuff, right? But I guess the key thing here is that our tooling helps us catch it, and then we were able to fix this problem super quick. So this is a screenshot of what our dashboard looked like about a year ago. And it essentially just gives us visibility, right? It gives us visibility of what's been tested. So at the top, hopefully you can kind of see my mouse as I move it around. These are essentially the systems, right? So we've got the different versions of iPlayer. We've got the website, we've got a version for TV, iOS and Android applications, and then some backend services, and then the equivalent for Sounds. And we've also got some broadcast interactive services that we look after as well, because it turns out that the BBC broadcasts TV via people's aerials and satellites, as well as streaming on iPlayer. I know, right? Who knew? And then down the sides, down here, just kind of moving the mouse around a bit, these are the different kinds of security scans that we intend to do. And you'll see that these are specific names of products or tools, and we'll go into the categories of these later. So this was a great starting position, but this is only our first step, right? And the problem with this is that it's a snapshot. It's frozen in time, a little bit like an MOT, really, in that it doesn't tell us what's safe right now. It's only what was safe on the day of the test. And I mean, that might not be too bad, right? If you're in a really slow moving environment where things don't change, but iPlayer and Sounds are not slow moving. Okay, it's no good snapshotting this stuff once a month if we're deploying changes 5 times a day. Which I suppose raises the question of, well, what's the next step? Well, the next step is to try and automate this concept and build what's known as an AppSec pipeline, which is an industry term, by the way. It's not something the BBC invented. And it essentially boils down to integrating security tooling into your continuous integration and continuous delivery pipelines. So taking the snapshot idea, but building it into our day-to-day tools. And in a sense, stopping insecure code shipping in the first place. So in iPlayer and Sounds, we're in the very early phases of getting this up and running, and we've got varying levels of support in different teams. It's still early days. But we can kind of see a pattern emerging where security is shifting left. And that essentially kind of boils down to moving security earlier in the software development lifecycle. So the snapshot idea was looking at things that were already deployed into production. The AppSec pipeline is about moving that back and testing changes before they're released. And then we've got other practices such as threat modeling, which go even further back, which is looking to make sure that security is done at the very start of the software development lifecycle. So this very much supports that shifting left idea. So how does it look in practice? Well, the way that it works is the teams commit a change to source control, and that kicks off a build in your standard build pipeline. And that build should be instrumented with additional steps to perform different types of security testing. So you'll see on this slide, I'll just move my mouse around a little bit, you kind of see these 3 boxes here, and they represent different categories of testing. So you've got kind of static application testing at the top, which is really just like static code analysis, right? Using tools like semgrep. We've got dynamic application testing, which is like dynamic analysis, really. So dynamically crawling a web application, trying to find vulnerabilities using tools such as Burp Suite. And then finally, source composition analysis, which is focusing in on kind of like your third-party dependencies using tools like Dependabot and the OWASP dependency check tool. And then this data gets pushed into a centralized defect tracker where metrics can be collected and reports can be generated. And there is benefits to having all this information in one place, especially if people can remember the event source NPM module. And if you haven't heard about this, briefly, the story behind it is it's an open source piece of software, but the ownership was handed over to a malicious user who then added cryptocurrency mining into the package. And the problem with this is when we do a build, we pull that package in, and we'd pulled in that cryptocurrency mining piece as well with it. And this was tricky because a lot of our packages didn't directly depend on it, but the packages that we did depend on indirectly did. And this affected people all over the world, right, including teams that I worked with. And we didn't know who was using it. Like, how do you know how many projects in your organization are affected by a change like that? It's a hard question to answer, but hopefully having this information in a centralized tool can capture this information and make it easy to search and answer those sorts of questions. So that is the AppSec pipeline. And I've talked a lot there about the tech and the tooling, but I want to finish the talk talking about the softer side of security, because the people side is just as important. And I'm going to start with culture, which in part is made up of things like mindset, beliefs, habits, attitudes, which all come together to form behaviors. And I think there's a real recognition that security needs to change, like in order to work well in agile environments. And just as a quick disclaimer, this is a very much a mixture of my own personal views based on experience of the last few years. So the headline of really what I want to get at is summarized quite well in this quote, which is that security requires humility and a radical acceptance of reality. And I think the iPlayer and Sounds approach very much reflects this, that it's better to be open and honest about our security position so that we can improve it, rather than to be closed and avoid the conversation out of fear, whether that's fear of fault, fear of looking bad, or just fear of the unknown. And I guess part of the reason for doing this talk and kind of using our example is to kind of spread that message that security can be seen as a bit of a dark art, but it doesn't need to be. And security has to become inclusive. And by being open and accepting our starting position, we were able to make really positive changes, which might start by saying, I don't know, when you're asked difficult questions. So what makes a good security culture? And how do you know if your teams are doing it right? So this is a massive, massive topic and a massive rabbit hole, if I'm being honest. And I'm going to talk through this concept super quick. So the thing that's on screen is a maturity model that I've been developing alongside InfoSec. So what's a maturity model? Well, in a nutshell, it's a way to measure the ability of an organization. So we started by identifying the cultural facets that we wanted to change and then put them into 3 groups, which is kind of what's being presented on screen in a bit like a traffic light style system. And I guess in a nutshell, our job is to look at what our teams are doing and then move their behaviors from the red to the green. So we're going from these tiles at the top here. I'll just move my mouse around a little bit. Kind of what's in red is tick box security, right? This is where we don't want to be. This is where we've been for quite a while. And what we want to do is move towards defensive and then offensive security. And hopefully by doing this exercise, we'll move towards the right attitudes and behaviors. So for example, if we take the example of, let's say, patchability here. So in a tick box security sort of environment, you'd expect little or no consideration to patchability. Okay. Whereas if you move towards offensive security to move you towards the green, you'd be looking for a seamless continuous deployment pipeline process to be in place. So having a proven ability to push patches using your CD pipeline is super important. Like, you need to invest in CI and CD. And in iPlayer and Sounds, we're really lucky because we've got a guild that specializes in optimizing our pipelines. But yeah, being able to fix vulnerabilities quickly and with confidence in the live environment is super powerful. And I guess just to use another key example, the software development lifecycle here, I'm just kind of moving my mouse again. I mean, this is another key indicator, right? To think about where security is happening in the life cycle of each team. And it comes back to that idea of moving security left. Excuse me. So you're looking at whether teams are looking at security, essentially building software in isolation and only considering it at the very end of the development life cycle, or whether they're looking at it moving towards the offensive side into the green. So from the very start of the design process, engaging with threat modeling activities, engaging with InfoSec early, looking at security through to production, through the life cycle and into decommissioning that software. So hopefully that kind of gives a bit of a taster of how the security model could be used. And I guess there's a few reasons why I've shown this. And it really boils down to, there's kind of been this niggling thing in my mind that I think we've made positive change, but how do you measure it, right? Where's your supporting data? Like, how do you know that you've made positive change? And I suppose looking forward, it'd be good to try and use this to try and score the teams on a maturity level and maybe use that to measure our progress. And I wanted to mention this because I think it's important. And if anyone has tried to measure their security culture, please reach out and let me know, because it'd be great to talk about it. It seems like a really tough problem to solve. So some key takeaways. Whole team security, okay? Security is everyone's responsibility. It's not just for engineers. And the whole team should understand the security position of the systems that they work on. And this sort of thinking really does bubble through the team. And I guess it kind of talks back to the examples that Jenny was talking about in the first talk. And I mean, I've got, just off the top of my head, a good example here around one of the product managers that I was working with, Jen. She was getting more involved in security in the team activities. And then one day that she noticed that someone outside the BBC had access to some important documents. And she came over and asked, like, who are these people? Why have they got access to my Dropbox? What's going on here? And it turned out that these people were actually contractors and they were given access ages ago, but they shouldn't have had access. Just nobody noticed and no one bothered to take them off. And the outcome was that their access was revoked. But the key message here really is that Jen's mindset shifted, not just in the security that we're building, but in just sort of day-to-day activities. And she identified a security problem and felt empowered to challenge it. And I think that's really important. And I guess in my eyes, that was a big success. Again, coming back to whole team security, risk is okay as long as it's well understood and accepted by the decision makers. And more importantly, that it's tracked somewhere, right? So make sure it's in a risk log or tracked as security debt as part of the product backlog. And I guess, again, it's where that whole idea of whole team security is super important, because how can a product manager be expected to prioritize a security fix against a product feature if they're not included in those conversations? So do encourage those discussions. And then finally, we need to make security part of our regular processes. So, I mean, security needs to adapt for agile working processes. It needs to speed up the development workflows and not slow it down. And this is where embedding security into existing processes is a good thing to do to make it as frictionless as possible. And that's exactly what we've been trying to do with the AppSec pipeline. And that's all I've got. So hopefully that was a useful insight into our security journey in iPlayer and Sounds. And thank you very much for listening.